What's up, y'all? This is Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast, and this is your college football lunchtime hangout. Really glad you guys can join us here. We'll just wait as more and more listeners and viewers get into the chat here, and we'll get started. As usual, we'll go about 45 minutes on this thing, and we certainly do appreciate you guys spending your lunch break with us, and girls, of course. So go ahead and start dropping your questions in the chat. I will run through a couple things that I didn't get to yesterday upon further review. And of course, make sure to vote in our poll. Let us know who is your number 2 team in the country. Alabama, Ohio State, maybe somebody else. Anyway, let us know. And I'll go ahead and just run through a couple things. So this morning, I wanted to find some cool trends and things and see what was up. But I really didn't find the trend that I wanted to find. I wanted to see, are teams going for it more on fourth down this year than they have in years past? And, I really thought that they would be, because we have seen some high profile teams do it. But now I filtered through them, and guys, I'm not seeing it yet. I am not seeing teams on the whole go for it more on fourth down, at least not on a percentage basis, right? I filtered by conference only, by FBS games only, filtered a lot of different ways, and maybe by first half only to see if teams were going for it more often earlier in the game. Obviously, the data can be skewed. If you're down a ton, you're going to have to go for it later on in the ballgame. And you know what I found? The rate of teams going for it is about the same for the most part. Now, I think as the season goes on, maybe we will see a little bit of changes. But ultimately, I'm not really seeing it right now. But I do have something for you guys. This is kind of a cool little stat nerd thing in me. Lane Kiffin is going to be the first coach, if this pace holds, to go for fourth down more than 50 times in a year. And that's going back at least to 2008. If there was some team that did it more often, I don't know, back in 03 or 91 or whatever, let me know. But as far as back as I could look this morning in the database, Ole Miss is on pace to go for it more than 50 times in a 12-game schedule, which is pretty nuts. Also kind of crazy is that you have several teams that I would say are not triple option teams. Navy is a triple option team, but Tulane and North Texas are also are also on pace to go for it a ton, 45 plus times, which in a lot of years would be the number 1 in the country. So we are not seeing more fourth down attempts across the sport just yet, but we are seeing it more at the very top. There are some teams that are all in for it. For certain teams, that's working out. And for certain teams, I wonder if there's a bit of like the tail wagging the dog going on because they have to, because they're down in games so often, like a Tulane, like a North Texas. They're just not very good this year. A couple other things I want to run into. Please keep getting those questions into the chat. Absolutely love that. And we'll get some more audience participation going here. So Bryce Young on third down has just been absolutely surgical the last couple of weeks. His numbers, I was charting this earlier, and I know they're not chucking the ball deep quite as well as they did last year. I know the offensive line is not quite as good as it was last year, and the receivers aren't quite as good, and maybe the type of competitive character on that team this year is not quite what it was in last year relative to the sport. I mean, Bama pretty clearly last year got all their stuff in, and they worked really hard together in the player-led practices in order to look that damn good last year. They were also super talented. But man, if Bryce Young plays like this the rest of the year on third down, there really isn't a game that they can't win. And so I'm pretty impressed with him the last couple of weeks. He was our number 1 overall recruit on 24/7 Sports. So pretty cool to see that. Another one I wanted to point out, and this is a shame because I really think Coach Jeff Hafley is a stud coach and will be an elite head coach, at a top school or back in the NFL at some point. But Louisville Boston College was not really competitive, and it probably should have been a blowout if the Cards didn't commit 4 turnovers, and they did. But if you look at like the yards per play margin and the success rate margin and things like that I like to track, that I used to write up every week back when I was, had a little bit more time to do content as opposed to managing, this would have been one of those games that I would have circled and said, this was not competitive. The turnovers kept this thing a little bit more competitive. Clemson's success rate throwing the ball continues to be really, really terrible. I will say I've been betting Notre Dame successfully at times this year and have felt pretty good about the Irish. And I don't want to say I got away with one on Saturday, but I don't know. I think they were the right side, but maybe not overwhelmingly. I was somewhat fortunate to cash that. USC moved the ball pretty damn well in the open field. Couple notes here, the final two. I thought Kansas was pretty creative, breaking out some stuff that Oklahoma probably did not expect in that game. They forced those freshman cornerbacks and freshman safeties to tackle and play some of that single wing stuff that I just didn't think they would, be prepared to play. Obviously, you're not expecting a team to break that out. So good on Kansas for trying to pull the upset, and that was cool. The other thing is I had Ohio as a pretty big money line team last week, and they didn't get it home. And yet, man, their EPA loss on turnovers was just tremendously big. If that's a neutral turnover game, Ohio very well could have beaten. They really could have beaten Kent State. Anyway, so those are just a couple of the notes that I was going to share with y'all today, or that I didn't get to share yesterday in the Upon Further Review Cover 3 podcast episode. By the way, do go ahead and make sure to follow me on Twitter. I think I'm almost like 67,000, which is pretty cool. We already went over one thing each contender needs to fix. I did that last week. One thing I was thinking about, right, is think about the value of a backup quarterback in today's day and age. And do you need to go ahead and recruit a guy who you don't project to be a stud, or who doesn't come in with big-time recruiting pedigree? Because he won't transfer out. Do you need to recruit somebody who, if he doesn't start in those first 18 games, is not freaking out about not the playing time and jumping in the portal? I think if you look at Penn State, how much better does their season look if they have Will Levis right now? He's not a good quarterback. He's okay. He's fine. But how much better does Penn State's season look this year if they just have somebody who is moderately capable? And you might counter that and say, hey, Bud, if the kid's not rated that well, he's probably not that good. Do you really want him going in the game? And that's fair. But I do think that some of these programs are being left in a difficult spot by the transfer situation. Yeah, that's pretty tough. I think that was basically it. All right, so let's go ahead and get to some of these questions. Appreciate all the well wishes. The baby moon over the weekend was great. Wife and I had some good food. I had some good drinks. Obviously, she can't because she's pregnant. Let's talk a little Michigan or Michigan State here. Bryce Schmidt wants to know. So if you follow Bud's Bets, first of all, I did send that email out to you guys because I wasn't able to do the live show on Sunday. Bud Elliott, CFB@gmail.com for that. Obviously, that's a pretty small audience, but it's a devoted small audience. So I had another nice winning weekend there, and 179 and 118 against the spread overall. So the Michigan State spread right now is like 4.5, I think, as of this morning, and 51-52. I like Michigan State at anything 4 or better, and I like the under at anything like 50 or 51 or better. So I did grab some 4.5. I grabbed some 52. I have a little bit of 51.5 in another account. And basically, I think Michigan is legitimately an improved team from where it was last year. I also think Michigan State is an improved team. Obviously, I've been on Michigan State quite a bit this year. What I don't know is going to happen here is, can Michigan run the football on Michigan State? I have a tough time getting a read on both of these teams. Michigan, they really haven't played anybody where they had to throw the football and threw it all that effectively, right? Nebraska game was very close. They were not great throwing the ball. They are missing Wilson. They're obviously missing Bell. That limits their offensive explosiveness through the air. Now, I do think they have more competent quarterback play this year, which is a big deal, right? In previous years, they have not had competent quarterback play. Michigan's guards were out last game. Not totally sure on their prognosis. Certainly, that would be a big help if they can get it back against Michigan State. But can Michigan throw is a major question I have in this game, because this is one of the better defenses that they've faced. I would say Washington was the best defense they've faced, probably, followed by Nebraska. Northwestern this year is pretty terrible. Rutgers' defense actually isn't all that bad. Rutgers' offense is just such a joke. Can Michigan State force them to throw in the football? And if so, can Michigan do it? It's a pretty big question I have there. On the other side, Michigan State is a team this year, and I'll pull these up so I can cite them and be accurate. Michigan State, to me, is a team that has been living on the explosive play, but offensively, they have not been super consistent, and they have been much more explosive both in the run game and the pass game than they have been consistent. However, Michigan this year is playing more conservatively on defense. They are not allowing the big play through the air nearly as much. They're not running all that stuff that Ohio State ripped those guys up with. And that, to me, is an important note, because in prior years, I would say this Michigan State team could be well primed to beat these guys. However, I think the quarterback battle here is honestly like somewhat advantage Michigan State, but not a ton. Both these guys have played some suspect pass defenses for sure, right? Northwestern is not, they're not good on defense this year. Miami didn't tackle at all in a Michigan State game. Now, credit to Michigan State, but Miami really didn't tackle well. Nebraska limited this Michigan State offense in a major way and showed the blueprint on how to slow them down. Michigan State won the football game because Nebraska's special teams and offense were just incompetent on that day. Western Kentucky throws the ball pretty well. Western Kentucky's defense is totally terrible, so they were not able to exert pressure on this Michigan State offense. Now, Rutgers was missing some guys, obviously. I understand that. But Michigan State hit those really explosive plays against them. And then Indiana was also missing some important cornerbacks and defensive backs in that game. And Michigan State didn't play all that well. They got the win 20-15. But I am a little bit skeptical of Michigan State. I announced that I was kind of off that train. However, I did not think that Michigan would be favored by this much. So I'm back in. Michigan State does run the ball fairly well this year. I think their offensive line is okay. They don't allow. Michigan State does a nice job of hitting explosive plays on early downs. Some of their pass protection on those latter downs is at times suspect. Teams have been blitzing them at times this year with varying degrees of success. I do think Michigan State's explosive play capability here is definitely something that is impressive. The other thing is that Michigan State has been extremely good this year at not allowing explosive plays defensively, especially through the air. They are one of the best in the nation at limiting explosive plays. Now, it is important, though, to remember, does Michigan have greater explosive capability than the teams we have seen on the schedule, especially through the air? Is Michigan more explosive through the air than Northwestern? Yeah, I'd say so. Probably. Yeah. Than Miami? Doubtful. But Miami also, that was the game, if you guys recall, that De'Aaron King got really, really banged up. Then Nebraska? I would say probably similar. Western Kentucky? No, Western Kentucky is a better passing offense than Michigan is. Rutgers, certainly. Indiana? Absolutely. So, yes, Michigan State deserves credit for not allowing big plays through the air. But it has not played a murderer's row of explosive passing offenses. And to be frank, neither has Michigan. That will be interesting to see in this game. Can Michigan get pressure without dropping back? Or excuse me, without blitzing? Can they drop a lot of guys into coverage and force Michigan State to execute on a down-to-down basis because Michigan State's passing offense is not super consistent. On a down-to-down basis, their third and long, third and medium stuff, really not that great conversion rate. So if you can avoid the explosive play, you can beat Michigan State, which is what I believe Michigan will attempt to do in this game. I think Michigan's defensive line can do okay against Michigan State. But what offense do I have more confidence in throwing the football? It is still Michigan State slightly. Michigan, with who they have out, I don't know who scares you on the outside. Cornelius Johnson, okay. Are you scared of Baldwin? I don't know, maybe, but they're not really crushing it there. I could be wrong on this game, but I expect this game to be a lower scoring slog of a game where explosive plays are limited by both sides, and it'll likely come down to who executes in the red zone better, who has better turnovers, and I think Michigan State is live to win the football game. The last time Michigan went on the road, and granted it's whatever, like the last time they went on the road, they didn't look all that great against Nebraska. The prior time they went on the road, they whipped Wisconsin. It's very possible Michigan wins this game, but in what I project is a lower scoring game, I will go ahead and take the points with Michigan State here, especially if I can still get that 4.5. All right. Really appreciate that question, Bryce. Make sure you guys follow us on whatever your podcast app is, and then make sure you go on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that bell. If we have an emergency episode, who knows? What if some coach unexpectedly gets fired, like when Ed Orgeron did? We thought he'd get fired. We didn't think he'd get fired the day after beating Florida. We may want to go live, and you get that notification on your phone so that you don't miss an episode. Let's go ahead and let me see. What other good questions do we have? Not going to touch the Harsin thing. Okay. Who do you think Illinois should go after in the transfer portal? I'm going to pass on that one because I don't know who's going to be in the transfer portal so far this year. Looks like every game. Corey Greer wants to know, what is your take on James Franklin changing agents after a bad loss and right before his biggest game of the season? Well, I mean, look, Jimmy Sexton is an excellent agent, and if that's who James Franklin wants to go with, then that's awesome. I saw the report, but what I didn't see was when the agent change actually occurred. For instance, did this just leak now, or did it just happen now? Maybe this happened earlier in the year and we didn't hear about it. I actually don't know on that one. So I mean, look, you have a good agent, so you don't have to worry about the contract negotiations yourself. I don't begrudge James Franklin for switching agents. I'm sure he had a great agent. I believe he was with Trace before, right? So both those guys have great reputations in the business, and that's a great client for Jimmy to get. But I don't think it has a huge impact, to be frank. There are a lot of Penn State fans out there on social this week who don't seem to like James Franklin, but I think he does a pretty damn good job. All right, let's go ahead and take – we already did the Michigan – we've got a lot of Michigan State questions this week. Awesome. Let's go ahead and take Jack – no. Oh, yeah, Andrew Zimmer's question. Does Oklahoma make the playoff with one loss? Are we assuming for this scenario that Oklahoma's loss comes before the Big 12 title game or after? Let's go ahead and run through the scenarios. Pull up Oklahoma's schedule here, just so I know what I'm talking about in front of you guys. All right, so Oklahoma right now sits at, 8-0. They have wins over Nebraska, West Virginia, at Kansas State, Texas, TCU. Of course, they got the Kansas win last week. Tulane and Western Carolina look worse every week. To be honest, this Nebraska resume right now, or this Oklahoma resume right now, is not super impressive to me. They've have one-score wins over one top 25-ish caliber team, I think, in Nebraska. And I do think Nebraska is probably top 25 caliber. They just keep losing these close games, but they're competitive in them. They did blow out TCU. I think TCU is like a top 50 team, and they really handed it to them. So that counts as an impressive performance in my book. But they have a lot of really close games. They are not dominant over these teams that are decent but not great. I would actually argue, to be frank here, that Pitt's win by 31 points over Georgia Tech and Atlanta is more impressive than anything Oklahoma's put together so far. However, let's note this. The back half of Oklahoma's schedule is much tougher. If you go watch the video that I did last week on Oklahoma and their defensive backs all being hurt, that's going to decide their season. If they get those guys back, I think they can run the table. If they don't, they are likely to lose at least one game because the guys they have in there playing right now are just not good enough. They're just not. Like, you're probably not going to run the table with that. Oklahoma has Texas Tech this weekend. Then they have the bye week. Then they go at Baylor, Iowa State, at Oklahoma State, and then they will face whomever in the Big 12 title game. I think at this point that's probably Iowa State, but it will depend on what happens in those final 3 weeks. If Oklahoma loses a game but wins the Big 12 title game, I do think that they are most likely going to be in. But I don't think it's a lock by any stretch, right? If they were to go to the Big 12 title game undefeated and then lose that, then the committee, which so often relies on, hey, they're conference champions, that's tough. I don't think that they get in if they lose the Big 12 title game at 12-1. Now, that will depend on what happens with Oregon. It will depend on what happens with Alabama. Like, if Alabama runs the table and Georgia's sitting there with one loss, I think both Alabama and Georgia are going to go over a one-loss non-champion Oklahoma. Would they both go over a one-loss Big 12 champion Oklahoma? I think so. I think so, but the margin is slimmer there. If Ohio State runs the table, I'm pretty sure they're in. If Cincinnati continues to run the table, I think they're in. Although, guys, SMU is not favored by much this weekend over Houston. Interesting to note that, just saying. If SMU starts to falter, there's very little else on this schedule for Cincinnati. And Cincinnati does not play Houston this year, at least not in the regular season. So Cincinnati's resume could end up crumbling a little bit, especially if because Indiana's already taken losses left and right. If Cincinnati, if the rest of their teams continue to crumble like they currently are, they really need Notre Dame to stand out as that top 10 type win. If Notre Dame continues with just one loss this year, then I think Cincinnati's in if they run the table. But, I mean, Tulane going nowhere fast. Tulsa, okay, but like Tulsa's more of like a top, what are they, top 85 type team, would you guys say? Somewhere in that maybe 70 to 85 range. Not going to impress the committee. USF's a bottom 100 team for sure. SMU, I just have a hard time seeing SMU get into that game undefeated. And then East Carolina, which has been very up and down offensively, they're troubled. I don't know. We'll see what happens on that one. But Oklahoma is a one-loss playoff team. I would say it's possible, but maybe not, not super, super likely. All right, let's take Alyssa's question here. She says, hey, Ohio State, Penn State predictions. Go ahead and pull up my week 9 here. I did bet Ohio State at 16.5. By the time I put the column out, that was not available, so I did not put that. That will not be in my official, record stuff. Thus are the perils of taking some in-season vacation. But let's see here, my scores for this game. First of all, I want to note that Ohio State's passing game really is like that damn good. They have who, in my opinion, is the best running back in the country, and TreVeyon Henderson. I really think TreVeyon Henderson would have started for Ohio State last year if he could have just, not gone to high school for his senior year. I think he's like that good. And So for me, uh, pull this up right here. I have this game 38-17 Buckeyes. That's kind of my best like round number score. My prediction is actually a little bit more narrow than that. It's not really a 21 point prediction. It's like 19 and a half, but I'm just trying to round, kind of round the prediction. Right now, Penn State, they've struggled running the football. Their passing game, unless Clifford gets miraculously more healthy, is just unlikely, I think, to matter all that much in this game. Now, Ohio State, it is worth noting, they've kind of gotten healthy defensively since the change of play caller from Kerry Coombs. But think about who they've played since then. Tulsa, which is not good on offense this year. Akron, which is terrible. Rutgers, which has one of the worst offenses in the country. Maryland, which did have a really good offense. However, I went ahead and took Ohio State against Maryland because we know that DeMoss is out for Maryland, and then Jashaun Jones also out for Maryland. So their top two receivers for the Terps were out in that game. And then Indiana, who, look, I love Tom Allen and what his staff does there, but they've been kind of wrecked by injury this year. They can't get healthy, and we knew their offense would be bad. That's why on the Locks Pod, which, by the way, I went 9-1 this week on the Locks Pod, so who saw that coming against the spread? That's exciting. I went ahead and bet the Indiana team total under against Ohio State because of the injuries that they had there in the first half. I do think Ohio State's defense has made a couple tweaks. They are playing a greater variety of coverages now, just from the numbers I can look at and from the clips I've watched of them. But it's hard to just totally change up what you do defensively in the middle of the season. And I've said before, I think if last year was not a COVID season, Ohio State would have made a change at defensive coordinator. But a lot of people got passes for what happened last year during the COVID season. And I think that's probably a fair thing to do because it was a very difficult situation. It was hard to install your stuff. But I just think Ohio State's being hurt by not making a defensive coordinator change following the 2020 season. Penn State, even with Clifford banged up, and I know this sounds crazy after how bad they looked against Illinois, I do think Penn State has an opportunity to challenge Ohio State's defensive backs better than any team Ohio State has faced since Oregon. Now, can they run the ball enough? Will it matter? Does Ohio State get out to a big enough lead to where none of that stuff really matters? Ohio State, playing with a lead makes a whole lot of sense. Penn State's defense is still very strong. I like their back end with Brisker and those guys. But again, think about the past defenses that Penn State has played. And I'm going to talk about this for a lot of Big Ten teams, by the way, this week, because there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are not just not great at throwing the ball. They're just flat out incompetent throwing the football. And then they have Ohio State here, which is so much better throwing the football than I think any other team in the country right now. It's just a different animal. So we have a covariance issue. Shout out to my friend Bill Connolly, who talks about this concept. And I know he didn't invent the concept of covariance, but like, are you good against bad? Does that always translate? If you dominate bad teams, does that always translate to being good against good teams? And a lot of times it does, but not every time. And so tell me which of these teams' passing games are even somewhat of an approximation for what Ohio State can do. Wisconsin in week 1? Ball State? Auburn? Okay, probably the best one they've seen so far. Still not a great throw team. Certainly don't push the ball down the field very well. Villanova? Okay, pass. Indiana? No, again, Penix hurt. Iowa's one of the worst passing offenses in all of college football. And then Illinois. Again, that game went to 9 overtimes, and it still hit the Vegas under. I do think that this Penn State defense is good. They're missing some important players up front, including Mustipher, who I think is a pretty big deal. Ohio State's offensive line has been blocking well. They have too many options. C.J. Stroud can throw the ball to all quadrants of the field, which is a big deal because it makes you play more honest as a defense. And I think Ohio State's defense is improved enough to where it can get out to a multi-score lead in this game. We'll see if I'm right about that. We'll see, but I'm willing to take that chance. But I don't want to play this game over 17, really. Like, if I had to for a pick 'em, I would take Ohio State anything in the teens. But for my money, I'm not going to play this thing at anything more than 17. But Alyssa, I appreciate the question. Let's go ahead and stop here real quick. I do want to show you all. This is my Memphis State sweatshirt. Look at that. Kind of old school logo. I wore this at the park the other day with my son. It was pretty cool. Somebody said, "Where'd you get that?" I was like, "Oh, Home Field Apparel." Home Field Apparel. Awesome custom old school retro logos for college football fans. Go to homefield.com. Check it out. Home Field Apparel. Promo code Cover3. Use that promo code Cover3 and make sure you tell them that we sent you. Enjoyable experience, good customer service, and just a fun product. This thing is comfortable as hell. I'm in Florida. It's not overly warm. I'm obviously a big guy. You know, it's okay to wear. And I mean, I keep my office pretty cold, but little Albert Bell Iceman thing going on here, right? Keep it cold, drink coffee all day. Let's go ahead and take another question here. Really appreciate Alyssa's question there. Yeah, so PGP688 asks, "Hey, Bud, apology if you can't get into it, but does Kyle Hamilton's status impact your buy point for North Carolina?" Making sure I haven't missed something this morning on cool. Yeah, so Kyle Hamilton is out. Look, if you watch that play, I think you already should have had him listed as out in your power ratings. But normally, like, how much do you adjust the team's power rating for having a guy on defense out? I would say not that much in a typical situation. But I do think that Kyle Hamilton fundamentally changes what Penn State, Lord, what Notre Dame can do defensively. He is such an eraser. I saw him on the back end when I was in the press box at Doak in Tallahassee. And I've only seen a couple guys make plays like that on that field from that vantage point. First was when I was a student in Tallahassee. I saw Sean Taylor go and make a play like that. Just ridiculous interception with that kind of range. The other one was a guy named Terence Brooks who played on that 2013 team, and they let him against NC State. He makes just an absolutely insane interception. But the pick Hamilton makes in that FSU game was similar. He is such a difference maker on the back end that I do think losing him merits, first of all, increasing the expected points allowed from Notre Dame's defense a little bit, right? I'm not going to tell you exactly how much I bumped it up, but I do think he's impactful enough to where you need to adjust that slightly. And then also, I actually did move Notre Dame's overall power rating a little bit. Now, it's just one player, so you're not going to move it. Like, I'm not going to make them all of a sudden 5 points worse, something like that. But I did move them like a half point. I think he's a fairly big deal for their power rating. And I would consider moving him even more, to be honest. But that's the adjustment that I made for that. I think he is a really one of the few guys on defense in the country who I would actually adjust if just one guy was out, right? For the most part, if it's just one dude out on defense, I'm not going to make an adjustment. Like I'll tell you, Buffalo might have 2 defensive ends out this week. And so I did make an adjustment there because to me, it's more the cumulative effect, right? Okay, wait a second. You have all these guys out. Now you're really dipping into the ranks. You're going to have multiple freshmen playing. Maybe you got to get in your walk-on ranks. That's not really what you want to do. Okay, let's take got a lot of Florida questions here. Do you guys want some Florida questions answered? We'll go ahead and get into that. Let's see. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit of Florida stuff. Peyton Lerner wants to know, am I an idiot for thinking that Florida makes it a close game with Richardson? Close as in covering. No, I don't think you're an idiot there. I went ahead and played Florida plus the 14.5. I think that's something that actually, I mean, we'll see if it keeps rising or not. It wouldn't shock me if it did. Here, make sure I'm pulling up my odds sheet. When I put the column out, they dip down to 14. So if it gets back up to 14.5, I'll go ahead and add some of that to the column. Where are we at here? So yeah, I'm seeing a couple 14.5s. out there. I don't know that this thing's going to get under 14 or down to 13.5. So I would go ahead and just sit and take some 14.5. I don't think it's going to go to 17 though. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at Georgia. Georgia has been historically dominant on defense, just super dominant. And we have seen some things where I feel like we know about Georgia. Georgia's front seven is stupid good. They have 3 guys there who I think will safely be top 100 picks, and a couple guys who are probably going to be first-round picks on defense. You know, they might be the best front seven since that Clemson team that gave Alabama such a run. However, again, much like the exercise we did with Michigan and Michigan State, let's go through and see which passing offenses Georgia has faced. Because I think if Georgia has, and I'm not going to call it a weakness because that's going to end up on a bunch of reels, and I don't think it's actually a weakness. Let's say a lesser strength relative to the whole, or perhaps a bit of an unknown. Who are the best passing offenses Georgia has faced this year? Well, Clemson's passing offense looks worse each week, so probably not them. UAB, who has the track record for just playing these bye games and not showing anything, not even trying, it seems like that's an angle I need to do a better job of exploiting in betting. Because when UAB goes and plays these bye games, they just get their doors blown off and they don't really care. South Carolina, one of the worst passing offenses in the country. Vanderbilt, shout out Barton. I think he's going to get that thing turned around, but they're not there right now. Still waiting on a passing offense to show up. Arkansas. Well, do you guys like Arkansas's passing offense? That day, you had the quarterback for Arkansas who was kind of banged up. Jefferson, wasn't super mobile. We knew that Burks had been in a boot for a little bit. I don't know, man. That passing offense is also one that is their drop back game is not very good. If they have the ability to run the football, then they can throw play action off it. You cannot run on Georgia, I don't think. I mean, just they win so many battles up front. Their run defense, adjusted for opponent, is number 1 in the country, like by a ton. And they have played some good rushing offenses. So I am confident that Georgia has a really, really good rush defense. I'm not sold that it has a historically elite passing defense. And so we'll see, right? Kentucky is another team. Their drop back game is just not good if it's not off play action. They're running a lot of that Los Angeles Rams stuff to where, it's wide zone, play action off that stretch stuff. Okay. And that's great against most teams. But against Georgia, that's not really going to work because Georgia can win a numbers game against you. They don't necessarily have to be +1 in the run game in order to shut you down. And that is problematic because they don't fall for some of the play action and some of the RPO stuff like a lot of these defenses do. So again, this is an unknown with Georgia because I'm still going down their list and I have not seen a great passing offense yet. I think this is similar to what we saw with Penn State. Is Auburn the best passing offense that Georgia and Penn State have played? I think it probably is, right? 30th in success rate, 37th in efficiency for Auburn's passing offense. However, I want to point this out. Auburn is outside the top 100 in passing explosiveness. They do not push the ball down the field very effectively at all. Now, let's go to Florida's passing offense. This is interesting. Can Florida present this test? I thought last year that Dan Mullen, his primary objective was to create a one-on-one situation. Because if you get one-on-one, all right, you can beat somebody with Kadarius Toney. You can beat somebody with Kyle Pitts. This year, I think you have to have more of a one-on-none situation because Florida's playmakers on the outside are not anywhere near as good. However, Dan Mullen has messed up some games this year for sure. They've also had some very bad turnover luck, as we saw against LSU and the Kentucky with the field goal, getting blocked and returned for touchdown. Florida's pass offense this year has been pretty damn efficient, right? They're 10th in success rate. They're 20th in passing efficiency per Connolly. They do push the ball down the field a little bit better than you thought. that they might. With Florida, do I think they can go and score 40 on Georgia? Not really. But Georgia, if you can play with them a little bit, I think Florida can play with Georgia some. This will the cover in this game, I suspect, will come down to just how good is Georgia's secondary really? Because this is another test for them. It's probably the toughest test Georgia is going to have in the passing game until it plays most likely Alabama in the SEC title game. And then can Florida make Georgia throw the football? Georgia has had so few opportunities to actually throw the football when it basically had to do it this year that it's very hard to judge how good their passing game is. Their passing game in all the stats looks great. But I think Georgia has had the luxury, and it's a deserved luxury. They go out there and they earn that luxury with how good their defense is, with how good their run game has been. They had the luxury of playing with the lead basically all the time. And there's been very few instances in which they've had to drop back and pass. They have had very few high leverage passing spots. I am not super confident in Stetson Bennett and this receivers group that they're all that great, to be honest. Maybe they're going to prove me wrong. I'm willing to bet on Florida here, plus 14.5 points, obviously. I do not think Florida is going to win the game. And Georgia has some real motivation in addition to the national title. Not that I believe in this motivation stuff all that much, but I'm sure they remember last year in the back of their mind when Florida kind of dunked on them and made that defense look bad. So can Dan Mullen scheme up enough to keep this within 2 scores? If Georgia gets in a tight spot where they have to throw the football, can they do it? And can Florida even put them in that spot? Because the last time we saw, so Florida's faced some good rushing offenses this year, right? Let's discuss this angle of the game real quickly. Florida has faced some good running offenses, and they have had some mixed results. They shut down Tennessee pretty effectively, 38-14. They really shut down Kentucky's offense. They lost the game because of 15 penalties, most of them on offense, and then a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. But they did shut down Kentucky's run game. Now, Alabama did not run the ball on them super well either. LSU, however, did. LSU got them, and basically Florida did not make capable adjustments. LSU kind of whipped those guys to the line of scrimmage as well, and Florida's lack of adjustments were such that LSU was able to get consistently good angles, which is problematic as well here. I'm sure Georgia watched that game, and if Georgia just bullies Florida up front, we may go another week or another month, honestly, without knowing if the Bulldogs can pass if they have to. And we'll maybe not know just how good Georgia's pass defense is. Okay, we do know it's good. Is it like crazy all-time elite like I think their run defense in this era probably is? We'll find out. But that is really predicated on Florida being able to stop the run decently enough to force Georgia into those passing situations. And I'm not totally convinced Florida can do it as far as being able to win the game. I do think Florida here is a couple points too high. And again, that's what I'm doing. I'm betting for value. I'm not putting my house on Florida here. I bet 50 games last weekend. I'm trying to be a lot more right than I am wrong. I will get some games wrong. I'm just going to get more right pretty consistently, I think. Cool. Guys, we are almost at 45 minutes, so I will go ahead and take one more question. I want to try to reward people who got the questions in here early, but I also understand that people are watching this on their lunch break. They're trying to, and not everybody takes an East Coast lunch break like I do. It's just kind of the time of day that it fits my schedule. All right, we already did East Carolina. We already did Michigan State as well. What are the scarcest positions? Actually, you know what? I don't really need the Braves to win the World Series. I'm not a huge Astros fan, obviously, but I already cashed my ticket on that. I had Braves for the National League as kind of a rogue number. Cool. People think Michigan's a fraud. People think Michigan State's a fraud, so I guess we'll find out. Those are some good comments there. We got any more questions here that are really, really good that I can tackle? Okay, Oklahoma or Cincinnati? This is a fun one. All right, so yesterday on the Cover 3 podcast live at 3 p.m. Eastern on Mondays, I said that right now I would take Pitt on a neutral field over Oklahoma. And it kind of blew up Twitter a little bit, and people disagreed with me pretty hard. And it wouldn't be a huge, huge margin, obviously. But right now, Oklahoma has all those guys out on defense. So would I take Cincinnati over Oklahoma right now? And I got to tell you, my power numbers have this literally to a half point no. I would take Oklahoma over Cincinnati. The thing is, if you play a schedule like Cincinnati has played, you have to keep blowing everybody out if you want to stay high in the power numbers. Oklahoma's not blowing people out. Cincinnati had that close game against Navy. I also think Cincinnati, in their biggest game, they got some real nice turnover help against Notre Dame. I kind of think last year's Cincinnati team is better than this year's Cincinnati team. I think the offensive line for Cincy last year was better, and I think the defenses are somewhat comparable. But that would be a hell of a game right now, because I do have Oklahoma adjusted down, quite a bit with those defensive backs out. Guys, we are at 46 minutes. Appreciate all the questions today, and I got to go grab some lunch myself. Make sure you like and subscribe. Maybe I can get some Twitter followers out of this, get to that nice 67 number. Makes me more marketable. And we'll be back again. Tomorrow is not a live show. Thursday is a live show. It is at 11. It is the Locks Pod. Another overall profitable week, I believe, for the group. So, again, have some fun, make some money, right? That's pretty cool. All right, guys. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.